Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the ScruffyMovies podcast. I'm Zach Wallace,
And I'm John Crocker.
and today is it's a weird one, but I feel like with this podcast we have to kind of dig deep into some of our more, some would say, embarrassing films or hobbies that we enjoy. And I know that one thing I really enjoy, I'm not very shy about admitting it, although a lot of people probably would be, is I love musicals and dance movies and all that kind of stuff. So today we are going to be talking about Grease and then probably all other kinds of musicals and dance movies and everything.
You know, I never would say that I am a fan of dance movies or musicals, but for some reason, Grease just has like slipped by that filter for me. I don't know why, but for some reason, I don't classify that, even though it is one of the greatest like musicals of all time.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it transcends what most people think of when they think of as a musical. So for me, I guess I put it on an exclusionary pedestal that it sits. So I allow it into my life, and I can admit that I love it, regardless of what anybody else says and thinks.
Is it just because it's about grease monkeys and you love cars?
I mean, there's that. Yeah, that's a big part of it for sure. But I don't know. I think that this, again, we say this a lot, but I think that our age group might have been like really well timed with Grease, because I definitely remember, growing up, like I had family members that always watched it back when everyone really would sit around the same TV. It would come on quite often. And that was probably when we were young, about the time that the reruns were on TV, like a lot. And if you had a mother who loved the movie, you watched it a lot. And then by the time we got into high school, it was like every school in the county at least did a Grease play, at some point in your high school career. And I wound up going to a bunch of those. So for some reason, I don't know, Grease just like stands above and beyond most other musicals. And it's weird because I know a lot of that like has to do with actually like high school drama and like weird things that also people might be embarrassed about. But I think that kind of lends itself to it as well.
Yeah, that was actually something I was gonna talk about is, I mean, just the reruns, especially on ABC Family. I felt like summer didn't start until I watched Grease like on ABC Family. Guaranteed, like anytime over the summer, I could flip it to ABC Family and either Grease was on at some point, just ending, or just starting. It felt like all the time I'd be like, man, there ain't nothing on. I'll just watch Grease, and I would flip it over there and it would be on.
I mean, my internet went out yesterday, and I knew full well that we were recording a podcast about Grease today, and I was forced over to my regular cable because none of my internet devices would work, which is a handicapping thing if you're me. And when I get over to the actual cable and I start cruising through the menu, I end up catching the last like 30 minutes of Grease. And that just 100% out of nowhere, did not expect it, but it was literally on TV yesterday when I had nothing else to watch.
That's pretty funny. Well, speaking of Grease and how much it means really to people and how it's kind of broken through this cultural status of being a movie people are embarrassed. It seems like everybody just kind of loves Grease. We are also going to be talking about Grease 2, which as of the last time I had heard, Crocker had not seen it, or at least hadn't seen it in a while. Did you get a chance to watch Grease 2? And if you did, what did you think?
I did. I got a chance to see it. I had definitely seen it a long time ago, because as soon as the movie started, I instantly knew, it's one of those things where you instantly know that you've seen that. But I'm glad I got to go back through it. It was not as terrible as I expected it to be. I went into it expecting it to be absolutely like a horrible rendition or attempt at the first movie, and I was pleasantly surprised. I think they did a great job with the second one. It is by no means as good as the first one is, but I like that they, I guess I would say, kind of played it safe, and they went with a lot of the same themes and covered a lot of the same ground. And they sort of just flipped the script a little bit, and instead of having the new girl who had to join the Pink Ladies and winds up wearing leather at the end of the movie because she, becomes a badass. It's a guy that ends up having to work his way into the T-Birds and ends up wearing tight leather in the closing number, so they really just kind of turned it around on itself, which in that play in general, in and of itself, was well executed. We've seen numerous movies, especially recently, where they'll sort of try and flip things and remake a movie like that, and it just falls flat. And I think they did an excellent job. They gave us just enough that we needed to connect it to the first movie, with Frenchie showing back up and the main bad guy kind of being the same, except instead of
that guy who's like 45 and picking on high school kids.
Yeah, like rolling up through the high school, tearing stuff down. Like, I thought that was weird in the first movie, how it was like this guy who apparently doesn't go to school with y'all. He's just like some bad guy in the town. And then he shows up again in the second movie, like still picking on the new class of younger kids. That was weird.
Dude, don't you got like a factory job to go back to? The Coca-Cola bottles are missing their tops. You need to go back and start screwing the tops back on the Coca-Cola bottles. Quit messing with high school kids.
And he's got like an unusually large gang for continuing to get his butt whooped. Like, that's what I don't understand. Why are these guys still following him around? He loses everything he tries.
Well, Grease 2 is at a funny kind of place for me, because like as a movie fan, and I've said this about a couple other movies before, specifically Justice League, as a movie fan, I can objectively sit back and I can look at the two movies and say, okay, Grease is the better movie. I understand that. It's the better story, it's fresher, better music, whatever you want to call it. But Grease 2, for some reason, is just so much like more infinitely entertaining to me. And it might be like stuff that goes wrong and it's just like it's fun to watch that, but also a lot of the songs are like toe tappers, even though they're not the best. Like the bowling song that's about people scoring, they're not the best songs, but they're toe tappers. And I find something new like every time I watch Grease 2 to enjoy. And it's like Grease 1 is like you've seen it once, you're like, cool, Grease. And it is infinitely watchable. You can keep watching it and the music's great and everything's still great. But Grease 2, I don't know. It's a very interesting movie for me because I just enjoy it much more than I enjoy the first one.
See, that's weird because I'm the exact opposite. The first Grease for me is definitely the one that is infinitely more entertaining. The second one was almost like, it wasn't too hokey or too campy, but it was just too something, and maybe it was too much of like a more modern musical, because the first one was certainly a musical, but at the same time they like fit the numbers in well, and it sort of went with the scene and what was going on. Whereas in the second one, I feel like it was just like any excuse to break into a number. And at least in the first,
they wrote the music and they're like, this is a good song, and then they wrote the movie around the music.
Right. Yes, I could totally see that. And for me, the soundtrack for the first Grease is definitely better than the second one. Like, totally. There are some toe tappers in the second one, but I mean, virtually all of the songs from the first movie, with the exception of maybe a few of the slow ones, like the Sandra Dee one, those are the ones, like any musical, where you just kind of know when that number comes on, like that's when you go to the bathroom, that's when you go refill your drink, because it is a little boring.
See, and like, I understand that. Like, in my mind, I can be like, okay, I understand. But if I'm just not lying to myself, I don't know. I just like Grease 2 more.
It was definitely more fast-paced and like a bit more colorful. That's for sure.
I think it also has to do, and this was another point I wrote down, because it was kind of the first instance I had heard of Grease 2. And I don't know if you've seen this movie. A lot of people haven't, but it's really good. It's a documentary called My Date with Drew. Have you seen that or heard of it?
Do not believe so.
Okay, so it's basically this guy gets on this like test pilot for a game show, and his team wins, but it's just like a pilot, so they're not offering big money. They're just like, hey, here's $1,000. Thanks for competing. And so with the $1,000, he buys a video camera from like Circuit City or something with the intention of returning it in 30 days to get his money back. But he's like, while we have this camera, I'm going to spend the next 30 days trying to get a date with Drew Barrymore. Like, doesn't know Drew Barrymore, doesn't like have any connection to her whatsoever. He just buys a camera and he's like, I've always loved Drew Barrymore. I'm going to get a date with her. And so it's literally him and his friends like going around Hollywood, meeting all these different like celebrities and stuff and trying to pitch themselves to like help him get this date with Drew. And the guy in that movie talks about Grease 2 a lot. He said he even talks about it of like the world. And he's like, there's a category I feel like people always fit into, and it's people who like Grease 2 and people who don't like Grease 2. And him and Drew Barrymore start talking about it and all this stuff. So I think maybe that colored my mind a little bit because I love that movie so much. And if anybody who's listening to this hasn't seen this, I would highly recommend it. It is a documentary, but it is like incredibly inspirational because this dude's just like sitting around doing nothing. And he's like, I'm going to make my life better. Like he starts working out in case he gets the date with her. And like he starts taking better care of like his body and like hair and what he wears and everything. So he's just sitting there, and then one day he's like, you know what? That's it. I'm going to get a date with Drew Barrymore. And so he like completely changes his life to try and get a date with her. It's a really cool movie.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I have never, not only have I not seen it, I'd never even heard of that. That's a brand new premise to me. Sounds interesting. And, you know, I think there's a lot of movies out there that you could say that about. Like, you can learn a lot from someone by asking them an obscure movie question like, do you like it or do you not? I definitely like Grease too. There's, you know, that goes without saying, but I can absolutely see how it would be a great litmus test.
Yeah. That's my litmus test is always the movie Wet Hot American Summer. If you've seen that one, that's always my litmus test for it. Is such a weird movie, but if you watch it and you like it, like you get the comedy in it, then it's like, okay, we can be friends. Like we can be friends otherwise, but now I know you're cool.
That's just like a really top tier, like not another teen movie style teen movie, you know, in my mind. Like I love it, the whole summer camp setting of it, but at the end of the day, I put that in the same category as most other like Van Wilder-y, you know, what you call it, gosh, not National Lampoons, but One Time at Band Camp. What am I looking for? American Pie. Like I put it on the same shelf with those.
No, I disagree.
Now, are you talking? Wasn't there was there a remake of that, or like a Netflix something that happened with that? Are you talking about the original or the redo?
No, the movie. So there was a movie in 2001, and then they had, I think it was in 2015. It was a Netflix original series, basically, but it was a prequel to the first movie, and it was called First Day of Camp, and they had everybody come back for it. And then they made a sequel to that series called 10 Years Later, because there's a joke in the first movie about how they're all going to meet up in 10 years from now and just see like how their lives are doing. So then they had the 10 Years Later sequel come out. And again, like all the same people and everything.
And that movie was kind of set in like the 70s, wasn't it? Bell bottoms, that kind of stuff.
I think it's the 1980s. I think
it might have been the 80s, like going into the 80s, early 80s.
Yeah.
I do like I mean, something that both of these movies have in common is sort of they're pretty well stuck in their respective setting. And the setting for Grease is one of my just all-time favorites. I mean, I think it's set like early 60s, like 60 or 61, but in reality, it's like 1950s, you know, greaser, back when men were men and women were women. And like, I love the scenes where Kaneki and Danny like hug each other and then they have to shove each other, you know, off real quick and like comb the hair like nothing happened, you know. I love the poodle skirts and the big hair and all the cars, obviously, and the hot rods and the motorcycles from the time, and the music and sort of the band and rock and roll just coming out. I mean, I really, really love that setting of the 50s, 60s, and we've talked about this in many other podcasts, but that probably lends itself a lot to why I like that movie so much. I like those two movies so much is simply because of that. Because I love just getting a peek into what times were like, even if it is totally Hollywoodized.
Yeah, that's why I really like the first Back to the Future, I think, a lot, because you have the modern man that you can connect to. I mean, not modern anymore. Marty McFly's from the 80s, but I mean, you can still connect to him, and he's also in this like man like displaced in time type thing. And I think that's another reason. I think there was just something so like, and we've talked about it before on this podcast. There's just something about the 50s which it makes Americans kind of go like, ah,
Yeah, back when times were good.
yeah, it's just something like, ah, the 50s. Like I remember watching Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. But when Indy first meets Shia LaBeouf, meets Mutt in the movie, and he goes into like the bar, or Indy might not even be there. It might just be like the audience kind of meeting Mutt. And he's in the bar with like all the greasers and stuff. And they're like, oh, the greasers are coming to fight the preps or whatever it is. And I was like, oh man, sweet. Like the 50s. Oh, wow. And I'm watching like an Indiana Jones movie, and I got way more excited for like this greaser fight in Indiana Jones 4 than I did about like anything else.
Yeah, I mean, the only other like couple of movies I can think of would definitely be The Outsiders. The Outsiders was a great
Yeah.
greaser movie. And then what the other musical was like, what was it? The Sharks and the something and other.
West Side Story.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Because that was sort of set in that same era, right?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that one is like the 50s or 60s. I think they even made that one in like the 50s or 60s. So that one might not even be like a big oh hey, yeah, a glimpse back in time. That one's just literally like was in that time.
Yeah, totally. God, I forget what it was. I was watching the other day and they referred to a movie that it was like made in the 90s or something as a period piece, or it was set in the 90s, and I was like, oh my goodness, like how time has flown when something, it was Captain Marvel, when
Yeah.
they refer to Captain Marvel as a period piece because it's set in the 90s, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I lived through the 90s, this is weird.
Do you want to hear something really weird? This is always like, of all the stuff that kind of makes you feel old, this has always made me feel the oldest. In like relation with when that 70s show premiered and when it took place in the 70s, today, like modern day today, you could make the exact same show with the same year difference between now and when that 70s show premiered. There's been enough time passed from the 70s to when that 70s show was made in the 90s to now from the 90s to if we made it today, it could be called that 90s show and have the same time difference.
Wow.
Yeah.
That one that's a mind bender. I'm gonna have to fact check you on that one after.
I guarantee you.
That is crazy. That
Yeah.
absolutely blows my mind.
That one, out of everything I've seen, that's like, hey, want to feel old? This premiered 15 years ago or something like that. And I'm like, oh, wow, that's crazy. That one always, I'm like, are you serious? Like the 90s doesn't feel that distant, but like the people that grew up in the 70s were watching that 70s show being like, look, our childhood. And now it's like, and it's happening too. There's a million shows out right now that take place around the 90s. Everything Sucks. Fresh Off the Boat, Pen 15, like there's a million things out now that are like 90s period pieces.
That 70s show first episode was in 1998. That blows my mind.
Yeah. And it takes place, if I'm not mistaken, I think the first season takes place in like 1977 or something like that, because they do kind of a little catch up. Basically, like the whole show only takes place over like a 3-year period or something like that, like as they're kind of graduating high school and then like a year or two out.
Wow. I didn't even, and they stopped, that 70s show stopped running before I even graduated high school.
Yeah.
I must have just like got on board on that one really late or something and caught a bunch of reruns, because that's mind blowing.
Yeah, that's the one where I'm like, are you kidding me? Like today, if it premiered today, the same time difference.
Man. Well, let's take this back to Grease a little bit. What do you say?
Yeah, I guess. My heart hurts for how old I am. So yeah, let's take it back.
I have a hypothesis for why you like the Grease movies so much, and that
Why
is,
I like them so much?
well, just hear me out on this.
Me specifically, though, or just like
You
society?
specifically. No, you specifically.
Okay, go for it.
Because I feel like these movies were some of like the first Mean Girls movies, where it's straight up like a clan of people in high school, a group of girls, a group of guys that pick on each other, and they get the claws out in both Grease 1 and Grease 2, in particular with the girls. And I see a lot of similarities between the Mean Girls franchise and the Grease movies, and I feel like that probably struck a chord with you somewhere because I know you like those movies.
Now, Crocker, why would you accuse me of such a thing? What about my personality leads you to believe I like bitchy teen stuff?
Well, the fact that you've openly admitted it on this podcast numerous times before.
I think even on like last Monday to work, I wore a Cruel Intentions shirt and was like, "Hey, everybody, Cruel Intentions."
When going back and watching that movie for the first time after having had all of those conversations with you, when there were a few particular scenes, especially like in the first Grease where Rizzo's messing with Sandy, and then they sort of treat, was it Stephanie in Grease 2? They sort of treat her as an outsider there in the middle where they're not sure if she's loyal. And I was like, oh God, this is just totally like a 1950s Mean Girls where they're pushing one of them sort of to the curb.
I mean, I've never really thought about it in terms like that, but I mean, I guess so. Yeah, I like those movies, and I have a little bit kind of to talk about that in halftime for something a little bit later. But I mean, those movies have just always struck a chord with me, and I don't know why. So I mean, yeah, maybe, maybe.
What was your favorite number? Speaking of musicals, what was your favorite number in either one of them?
I for as much as I like to make fun of it, I really like that Score Tonight song. I think that one's like really funny, and it's really funny to just kind of whenever he like knee slides down the lane and he's just like at the top of his lungs like ah, la, la, la. That's always good. So that one from the second one, because it is just the weirdest, like wildest number. And then from the first one, oh man, I don't even know. Like there's some maybe Summer Lovin'. I think that might be the one I've listened to the most. So that would probably equate to I like it the most. Probably Summer Lovin' from the first one.
I don't know. I didn't pay close enough attention going through the second one to really be like, this is definitely my favorite number. I was just kind of trying to actually watch it and absorb it. But I have, I've listened to the soundtrack for the original Grease loads and loads of times. And I would say that definitely one of my favorite scenes in the movie and one of my favorite numbers was certainly Frankie Avalon, Beauty School Dropout, where Frenchie's, they have the big band style staircase and all the girls with the crazy sparkly rollers and all that. Thought that one was awesome. And then I think it's at the very, very end of the movie where you've got Sandy and the tight leathers, and it's not the Wama Lama, whatever that song is. It's like You're the One That I Want, I think is the one they sing there.
Yeah,
That's probably
You're the One That I Want, and then they sing We Go Together.
We Go Together is the other one. That one's a little too 50s for me, but You're the One That I Want and Beauty School Dropout. And then, of course, just the original Grease theme for sure.
Yeah, that one always I thought was really weird because people are like, wow, they made like a 70s disco song for the opening of a movie set in like the 50s.
Mm-hmm. And the opening crawl is, like all the animation and him looking in the mirror and combing his hair. God, dude, I mean, that just, the fact that I can sit here and not having seen the first Grease movie in probably 5 years at this point, but the fact that I can sit here and be like, oh yeah, I remember exactly what the opening credits look like.
Yeah.
Like it's that solidified in our culture.
Well, I kind of along with Grease, there was an explosion of even more musicals and stuff throughout society. What would you say your favorite musical non-Grease is?
Oh gosh, favorite musical non-Grease?
I'll give you
This is where it starts to get like really into the potentially embarrassing.
Crocker, just do it, man. I was just talking about wearing a Cruel Intentions t-shirt to work. Just do it. Be yourself.
I'll probably say either Chicago or Moulin Rouge. Those are the only other two that are popping into my brain right now.
Yeah, see, like, that's not even that embarrassing. That could have been like, oh, yeah, old girlfriend drugged me to him. I actually ended up liking him a lot more than I thought I was going to. Mine are very embarrassing. They are the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which is a extremely strange movie, but that's probably my favorite musical of all time. And I hate to admit it, but probably High School Musical.
Dude, I have a confession to make. I've never seen any of the High School Musicals.
I remember I was just at the age where, like, you were still, like, you would still be, like, into the kid stuff, but it wasn't cool to, like, talk to anybody about it anymore, you know? Like, you would still watch SpongeBob and Disney Channel and stuff, but then when you went to school, you had to be like, oh, yeah, man, totally watched, like, American Wedding last night. It was sick, bro. And you had to just, like, act cool. And I remember watching the premiere of, like, High School Musical and being like, oh, this is really good. And then, like, I would just be, like, looking around and I would hear girls talking about it. And I'd be like, I want to talk with you, but I can't.
Yeah, I was just a couple of years older than you. So
yeah,
when that dropped, I was 100% disinterested at that point. And then they did like 10 of them, didn't they? And I just hadn't ever caught up.
there's 3 mains, and then there was a spinoff called Sharpay's Fabulous Adventure.
But, you know, I have to say that with Moulin Rouge, when that one dropped, that was like Christina Aguilera and Lil' Kim. Like, that one actually had a little bit going for it. And then with Chicago was just an all-around great movie. It's an all-around great play as well. But I can't really think of any other, like, musicals, really. I mean, like Sweeney Todd, blah.
Sweeney Todd's a good one. I like Sweeney Todd. South Park, the movie, is a musical.
Yes, it is. Mary Poppins.
Yeah, like all the old Disney movies are technically musicals.
Hey, Willy Wonka. Willy Wonka is totally a musical.
Yeah, it is. I can agree with that. I remember having the argument with one of my friends one time in like probably 8th or 9th grade, and me being like, yeah, South Park's one of my favorite musicals. And he's like, it's not a musical. And I was like, it's a musical. They sing all the time for no reason. They just start singing. It's a musical. And he's like, no, they just sing. And I was like, what do you call a movie where people sing in it a lot for no reason? And he's like a musical. And I was like, ugh.
Is Blues Brothers a musical?
I don't know. There's a weird dichotomy between musical. I feel like musical has to be where they just where they start singing. You know, like it's just in a scene and they start singing. I feel like Blues Brothers is a movie about music, but they do have that a couple times, like with Aretha Franklin in Blues Brothers and Blues Brothers 2000.
Yep. Isn't that the diner scene with Aretha Franklin where they just like break out into song for no reason? I mean,
yeah, she starts. I can't remember. I think she might sing "Respect" in Blues Brothers 2000. That's when they're at the car dealership, and she starts singing "Respect." And then in the first one, she sings something else, and those two. And then there's a couple where people just start singing. Yeah, I guess I'd count Blues Brothers as a musical. There are a lot of stuff where people just kind of start singing in those movies.
Rent would be the only other one I think that's come out anywhere near our sort of generation. And I didn't really ever like Rent. I don't know. That was just a little, it just didn't pique my interest. Like, I feel like that one was designed and marketed to a specific sort of demographic, and I set outside of that when it was going on.
My only interaction with Rent, I own the movie on DVD, the movie they made in 2005 or 6 or something like that. I bought it at a Goodwill with every intention of watching it. I just haven't watched it yet. So my first introduction, even really to the story of Rent, was they just did Rent live, and not even a month ago now, and I watched that, and I was just kind of confused the whole time, and I was like, I don't know. Maybe the movie's more congruent. They took a lot of artistic choices in the live show where I didn't follow some of them, so maybe watching the movie would be more consistent. But watching the live show, I was kind of like, oh yeah.
Wait, did
Hairspray is
you
another
know?
good one. Hairspray is another really good movie
Oh
musical.
yeah, hey, that's John Travolta was in that one, right? Well,
Yeah,
maybe not.
he was in that one too. Yeah, he played the mother, a role which I played my senior year of high school.
Did you?
I did, yeah. I
In
played the mom in
Hairspray?
Hairspray
Oh my goodness.
for
Now,
like the whole county too, not even just my high school.
was I know. Oh, what does that sound mean?
That's how it means it's halftime. Whoop. So halftime's just a little part in the show where Crocker and I take a break from the conversation we're having to talk about some of the more recent movies we've seen, movie news we've heard of, things we're excited about. And also recently, this is where we've been doing our digital code giveaways. And this week, it's going to be a little bit different because I wanted to give something to the people that are watching or listening to this because they like Grease. But then I also want to give something to the people who maybe just wanted to listen to get a digital code. And we needed to gain back some man credit for doing this entire podcast. So we will be giving away 2 digital codes this week. The first digital code, for the people who enjoy Grease and all this kind of stuff, we're going to be giving away Pitch Perfect 3 for free on digital copy. And then to gain some man credit back, a newer, more recent movie, Halloween 2018, the brand new Halloween we'll be giving away as well. And then the only word I could think of that they kind of both had in common was Scream. So that's going to be your code word for this week. Just comment it down below on the YouTube video you're watching right now, or direct message me on Instagram at ScruffyMovies. The code word again is Scream. So just comment that down below or send it to me in direct message, and you'll be entered to win digital copies of Pitch Perfect 3 and the brand new 2018 Halloween.
Scream is a stretch for Grease. I'll give you
What?
that.
I was trying to think of like what Pitch Perfect 3 and Halloween have in common. And the only thing I could think of was like people screaming, but one is singing and one is actual screams. So that's the only thing that came to my mind.
Yeah, I don't think I could have given you anything better, but when you said Scream, I was like, that's a stretch.
It's the only thing I could think of. Hey, either way, it just works as a code word. So comment it down below or send it to me.
All right. Well, this week for halftime, I've got a few things here that I might actually need your help on explaining to me.
Okay.
First one is going to be I saw a trailer for something that is called Tolkien. And it looks from what I've seen not to be like a biography, but more of like a creative storytelling of how Tolkien sort of may have lived a little bit in his life and developed some of the ideas and stories that eventually became what we know as his greatest works, Lord of the Rings, Hobbit, blah, blah, blah. So my question to you is, do you actually know, is this like a hardcore biography, or is this more of a storytelling of his life?
I actually haven't seen the trailer, but I remember them announcing the movie. And from what I heard, it was going to be, it's like a biography movie, but more with a focus on like the creation of Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit and everything, since that's like what he's primarily known for.
That's kind of what I was picking up on that as well. And then to sort of refer back to a statement I made last week, which is trying to get caught up on all these Disney remakes, live action remakes. We got to see the blue genie for Aladdin coming up, which he was very blue, which is what I expected, but still just looks weird. So I don't believe we've talked about that yet in halftime. So I wanted to put that one on the list because it is making waves at the moment and didn't want it to slide by. Maybe this is the second time we've mentioned it. And then last but not least on my list, again, referring to last week's halftime, where I believe it was you who said you would go see any movie that The Rock is going to be in. I had to put Fighting with My Family on here, which is the new Rock movie all about wrestling. Looks to be a bit of a family drama, definitely a comedy as well, but sort of another one of those Rock movies that may be more drama comedy-esque and not quite as much big actiony, edge of your seat kind of a movie.
Yeah, and I've actually heard that Fighting with My Family is really good. It has like a 90+% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes right now. People are like freaking out about it. So I just wanted to go see it regardless. But yes, also because The Rock's in it, I gotta go,
Yeah, I mean, he's earned that from you.
So halftime for me this week, there was a lot of like kind of little news, but I was very excited about. First off, though, before I get to any news, I did manage to go see two brand new movies this weekend. I saw the Lego Movie 2 on Friday, and then we just recently got back from Happy Death Day to You, which is kind of the teen bitchy movie I was going to talk about during halftime. Um, Lego Movie 2 was really good. It was really funny. It had a lot of really good character moments and interesting music and everything. I don't think it was as good as the first one. I also don't think it was as good as the Lego Batman movie, but I am kind of biased on that just because I like superheroes so much, and that movie kind of catered to my tastes more than just the traditional Lego movie does. But it was very good. I would recommend that. And then Happy Death Day to You was one that kind of took me by surprise, because the first Happy Death Day, while having kind of a sci-fi element, was a horror movie. It was a slasher movie with just a little bit of a sci-fi element to it. This movie kind of almost flips that entirely on its head, and it's more of like a sci-fi romantic comedy with a little bit of a slasher element to it. And it's almost, I mean, it's not really scary at all. There's still a killer coming after them, but that's the only thing that's basically driving the plot forward. And there's even montages and stuff of like the killer's not even creating the loop anymore. She's like killing herself to restart the day and everything. So it was really, really interesting. I really liked it a lot, but it wasn't really a horror movie, and that kind of took me by surprise. For some of the news, and this kind of caters to our age group as well. I don't know if you have heard this news before, but Are You Afraid of the Dark is going to be getting a live action movie, and kind of, I guess, in the vein of like the more recent Goosebumps movie or something like that. And to celebrate that release, they're also doing a mini-series revival of the TV show on Nickelodeon. So both of those will be coming out in like October of this year. Super excited about that. Nickelodeon also just recently announced that they're bringing back All That, and it's going to be produced by Kenan Thompson. They expect some old cast members to return, just in like guest formats and stuff, not anything really too serious. Nobody's going to be a main character on the show again, I think. But that's just something really interesting. I used to love All That, so that I thought was just kind of cool.
Heck yeah. I want to pause you for a moment to just say, heck yes. I was a huge All That fan. Huge. And when we were transitioning out of All That, and right where you were supposed to transition into like SNL and Mad TV, both of those were just spiraling out of control, and All That was only getting better. So I never really made that transition like a lot of people did, and I always wanted All That to come back around and continue being awesome. I hope they do. What was it, Good Burger? Yeah, they need to remake that somehow.
Oh, I'm sure they've got to redo that. They've like every iteration of All That has had a Good Burger sketch, so I'm sure they'll bring it back somehow.
God, I'm so excited.
Also, episode 9 of Star Wars just wrapped this week. They just got done filming. It comes out this December, and I'm really interested to see what they do this time. We still don't have a title announcement, but because it just finished wrapping, I assume that we'll probably get a title announcement soon. Jumanji 3 started production this week. Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle was one I enjoyed a lot. It really surprised me, and I've even gone on record as saying before, and I'll say it again, I like Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle more than I like Star Wars Episode 8. And that hurts me to say, but it's the truth. So I'm very excited about Jumanji 3. And then kind of off the Tolkien conversation we're just having, something you would be really excited about. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it or not yet, but Amazon is actually developing a Lord of the Rings television show, which is going to adapt all 3 of the books into a TV series, just a long-running TV series, kind of like Game of Thrones. They just released the map of Middle-earth this week, like the map that they are building their show off of. And I don't know if you've got a chance to see that yet, but I wanted to mention it because I know you would eat that up.
Yeah, well, I did hear that this was happening, but I also know that there are pre-existing like in stone maps of Middle Earth. So I would be curious to see how they've integrated that, maybe added new things or just zoomed in a little bit more and added some detail to areas that we may not have seen in the past, which is more than likely. what they're going to do, because there is, literally an entire realm to play around with. Now, you mentioned a few things there, and I know we call this sort of the news section, but if you'll allow me to dip into the rumor mill for just a moment, you've mentioned Star Wars and Game of Thrones, and there is a rumor currently that the sort of the spin-off Star Wars movie that the Game of Thrones guys, what was it, Weiss and
David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, I believe, are their names.
Right. There is a rumor floating around that their Star Wars anthology, Star Wars spin-off film will actually be a trilogy, which I'm all in on 100%, just, at the premise. And then there's also rumors that Rian Johnson's trilogy is still on the books, which I, for some reason, doubt. And I also think that literally every Star Wars fan would hate if that happened. So I would just look forward to the Game of Thrones fellas making an awesome trilogy that would stand alone, sort of outside of, as I understand it, the main core numbered series.
Well, now, I mean, kind of moving forward, I think their intention was to kind of earn fans' trust of the movies through the new Skywalker saga episodes, like through episodes 7 through 9. And now that that's kind of wrapping up, I would assume that the Star Wars franchise moving forward will probably just be more like kind of trilogy arc movies and stuff like that, which seems like a really smart idea to do. Like, just give really creative people trilogies, like the Game of Thrones guys, give them a trilogy, and then you've got content for the next, at least 6 years, because we're willing to wait a year between movies. We've waited, I don't even know the time gap, but between Return of the Jedi and The Phantom Menace, and then again from Revenge of the Sith to The Force Awakens, we didn't get anything new Star Wars really, unless you count the Clone Wars animated movie that came to theaters briefly in like 2008. But we're willing to wait. So if you just give people trilogies, 6 years of content can come out of that.
I'm going to pause you there because I do have something to say on that as well. I am currently going through the Star Wars TV show, and I have obviously watched the movie that kicks it off. And I have to say, the first time I tried to go through and watch either one of the animated series, it was too much. I didn't like it for some reason. I don't know why. It's probably just a little too made for kids, I guess. And the first time I tried to get into it, I just could not do it. But I am well into it at this point on sort of a second try. And I think because this time I knew what I was getting myself into, like I knew what to expect. I'd at least seen the first few episodes, went into it with my mindset totally changed, willing to accept it. And now I have to admit that I don't know why, as a Star Wars fan, I ever neglected myself the opportunity to get all of that lore and to see all of that story. They're great. They're absolutely great shows. And I suggest it to anyone who has been holding back, but you really do have to just go into it with the right mindset, be there to see the characters and to see how they play out, and don't let it hit you sideways if they slaughter an entire army and then have to explain what a big word is, because this is meant for children.
Yeah, I've always kind of felt that way too about the Clone Wars, because I like you, I watched episodes kind of intermittently as they were coming out, but then I really sat down and started to watch it, and it just kind of threw me off for some reason. It just wasn't like the Star Wars I had become accustomed to, which was like the PG-13, more like action movie Star Wars. And that's not to blame it on the Clone Wars or anything. They did a very good job of making the show they set out to make. And I do want to go back and start watching it again. And Crocker and I have actually talked about making that an offset show where it's just us kind of going through Clone Wars, Star Wars news and stuff like that, since we are both such huge Star Wars fans and we don't really get a chance to talk about it as much just in these little half times and regular episodes.
So if that's something that you guys want to see or hear, let us know.
Yeah, let us know, because we can get that set up pretty quick. That would not take long at all to do for us. We could just walk into a room. We could stop this episode entirely and have no preparation for what a Star Wars episode would be, and we could turn around and give you guys a 3-hour Star Wars episode right now.
Yes, with zero effort. It may not be very well organized, it might be more stream of conscious, but we could certainly get some entertaining content to you.
Zero effort, zero research, just Star Wars fan brains.
Star Wars fan brains. All right. Well, I didn't mean to cut you off there as you were going for your halftime. What else do you have?
That was actually all of my halftime. It was a million things to get through. It was a lot to get through. But, I mean, a lot of cool news happened this week, so I felt it was needed.
Totally. Well, I guess it's about time to go ahead and roll over into Quick Pitch, maybe.
Yeah, I think so.
Do you want to go first, or would you like me to go first?
You go first, because I still got to think of mine.
So my quick pitch is going to be quite boring this week, but I really do think that this is what needs to happen. Change nothing. Make it an awesome period piece from the 1950s. I want the T-Birds. I want the Pink Ladies. I want all the high school drama. I want every single thing that we get from both Grease 1 and Grease 2 that they executed on so well. I would like to see a Grease 3 with like literally recycle what the first two movies did, because I think that formula is the winning formula. And the only real like question in my mind is, do we call it Grease 3, or do we just say we're rebooting the traditional Grease, which might give you leniency to fit the story a little bit tighter, but not only that, use some of the classic tunes as well as sprinkle in some new ones. You know, I would love to see the world get as excited about a 1950s Grease movie that is a new movie as they did when the original Grease dropped, you know, back in, what was it, the late 70s or so. That's what I want to happen. I want it to be no change. That's my quick pitch.
Well, if you called it Grease 3 in modern Hollywood, it would definitely come out stylized as GR the number 3 ASE for sure, or GREAS and then the number 3 as one of the E's.
Totally.
Grathreese. Well, my quick pitch, I had kind of something in my head for what I wanted to do, and so I was thinking through that a little bit more. And I agree with you that what made the first two Grease movies really good were the kind of settings and everything. But I think that if you want to bring back the original characters of Danny and Sandy, which I kind of think you need really to make a really good Grease movie nowadays, I think it would be interesting to kind of place it maybe in like the 90s or something. I mean, who knows? But now that we're kind of in that nostalgic state for the 90s, it might be interesting to see these characters updated for then, because I think there can be a lot of comparisons to how people feel now just in the modern day and how they kind of felt about the 90s. But we kind of see that dichotomy through Sandy and Danny wanting to relive their youth from the 60s, you know, but now they're grown up, they have kids. I think that it would be best for the movie probably if they weren't together when it started. I think they should both be in kind of hapless marriages, or like Danny's just the always bachelor guy, like he just never settled down, and Sandy's husband isn't working out or something like that. Like there's something that makes them want to rekindle the flame, but it's not there when the movie starts. And I think that they can rekindle the flame by either like Sandy's kid. And I think this is an interesting kind of thing that like what Grease 2 did as well. I think Sandy's daughter or son could be like the real big troublemaker guy. And she's like, you know what? I had to go to this school. It taught me this. We're moving back and you're moving to Rydell. And at the same time, Danny has this like little sweet, innocent, precocious daughter who she's just always been going to Rydell. And Danny's like a single father. And I think through those kids finding each other and kind of coming together as their relationship forms, we see Danny and Sandy's relationship start to form as well. And then there can be a lot of really funny stuff about kind of they don't understand the 90s, and it could be like huge computers in a room or something. And they're like, man, how crazy is technology these days, huh? We're never going to beat this. And like those type of jokes, I think audiences would really like nowadays. I think just if you want to make a really good Grease movie, you got to go back to Danny and Sandy. You can even have the end, like the big climax of the movie be the prom, and it's like a flashback to 50s prom. And so then we see Danny and Sandy show up as T-Birds and Pink Ladies. And I think that would make for a really cool, really interesting movie, kind of focusing on their relationship and how it's displayed like through their kids finding each other.
I think you're wrong. Don't change anything. Keep the formula the same. No, that sounds good. The only thing, I like where you're going with that. I like that a lot. But you can't have Danny and Sandy fall in love and their kids fall in love. Then that would just be some weird Brady Bunch style incest.
I never said they had to get married.
Yeah, but you can't tell two love stories.
I never said they had to get married. Maybe it's like Danny's niece. That would make it a little less weird.
Yeah, there you go. See,
Danny's
now that,
got it.
Yeah.
Or like Kaniki and Rizzo's daughter, and Danny was the godfather, and now he watches over her because Kaniki and Rizzo have passed away or something.
Yep. Fun fact: I plan to name my firstborn son Kaniki.
Kaniki Crocker.
Nikki Crocker.
Man, you were just asking for trouble for that kid learning to spell his name.
You're just breeding him to be a badass.
What's his middle name gonna be?
I haven't got that far.
Kaniki Kaluki Crocker.
Balthazar or something hilarious.
What? Oh my God! He's never gonna be able to spell it. He's just gonna be. He's like, hey, yeah, you guys can call me Ken.
There you go, or Nikki, yeah.
Yeah, call me Ken or Nikki. I don't want to be. It's too hard to spell. Call me one or the other.
I don't even know like where they got that name from. I've always wondered that because I'm pretty sure that's the only Kaniki on the face of the planet.
It's the only one I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
Well, I guess that about wraps it up for us here. We hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said, we knew this podcast specifically was going to kind of get off course. I think we mainly stayed on the road, though. We might have taken a couple little side roads, but we always ended up back on the main highway. But we thank you guys for listening. Once again, if you want to be entered to win a free digital copy of Pitch Perfect 3 and the new 2018 Halloween movie, all you got to do is comment the code word SCREAM below, or direct message me at ScruffyMovies on Instagram, the code word SCREAM, and you'll be entered to win a free digital copy of Pitch Perfect 3 and the new Halloween movie. Please follow us on Instagram at ScruffyMovies.
And Crockalicious.
And we hope you guys enjoyed, and we can't wait to see you all next week.
Bye!